for inviting me. Um, so about myself, I'm a writer. I write fiction and nonfiction. My most recent books are one of each: The Runaways, which is a novel, and New Kings of the World, which is published by Liberty Books in Pakistan, which is a nonfiction book about popular culture and the change in global popular culture away from a Western model to an Eastern model. And those books are both out now. So at the moment, I'm between books. I haven't started working on a new one just yet. So I've been doing little bits of journalism and essays and book reviews, things like that at the moment. Well, I think if you're a writer, you're always working on something, and you never quite know if that something is going to become a book. It might become a book, it might become nothing. So I've done a bit of that, yes, and I don't know yet what it's going to turn into. But on the other hand, I have written pieces of essays or journalism. So I've got an essay coming out next week in LitHub about the runaways and the internet and the weaponization of loneliness and an alienated generation. I have reviewed a few books. So I read a really great book called Minor Detail by a Palestinian writer called Adania Shibli. So I wrote a review about that. I'm writing a piece on Ertugrul and its popularity in Pakistan. I mean, it's been really interesting actually to look at why Ertugrul is so popular in Pakistan. But yeah, hopefully that'll be out in a few weeks as well.
Great.
Well, its independence is always a reminder of what a young country Pakistan is. 73 years old today. It's really in its infancy, and my wish for Pakistan is always really that we grow in kindness to each other and respect for all our brothers and sisters, whatever kind of Pakistani there are, because of course there are many different ways of being Pakistani. And in terms of independence and liberation, what it means, I'm not sure it's possible to be free unless everyone is free. And by free, I mean not only that people have a right to a dignified life, that they have a right to a dignified future, that they are supported and protected and safe in their countries, that they are safe from things like hunger, that they are safe from fear, that they are safe from violence. So I think in this sense, it's very difficult to look at a place that is truly free. These are things that all countries struggle with. And they struggle with them whether they're 73 years old or whether they're 300 years old. But Pakistan is a young country, and it's a country made up of young people. And I hope that our generation will be one that works and struggles to make sure we are the country we were promised to be. Yeah, I think it has to be revolutionized because we are in a curious time in the world. We're in a time in the world where all around us, in our neighborhood, far away from us, in America, in Europe, in wherever, there's a rise of a very ugly kind of politics. It's a politics of intolerance. It's a politics of fear. It's a politics of attacking anyone different. And, we have many examples of this. And I think we need to revolutionize our own ideas. We need to really examine how we can criticize other countries for being intolerant if we are intolerant. I think we have to remember Jinnah's founding promise, which is that it was going to be a country that was a refuge for everybody, not just Muslims, for our minorities as well. I don't think we've practiced that in the best way that we can. And at 73 years old, we don't have a lot of time for excuses. We need to revolutionize that. We really need to revolutionize our approach to the invisible in our society. Nobody is invisible. They are made invisible, whether these are women or these are the poor, or these are people who deviate from the standard idea. The idea of Pakistan is such a beautiful one. It can include everyone. It has space for everything. There's not only one kind of Pakistani. Pakistan, in its form and in its heart, has enough space for everybody. You just have to have a look at the budget and see how much Pakistan spends on healthcare. Nothing for its people. We're one of only 2 countries in the world that still has polio amongst its population. That's outrageous. At exactly this moment, polio workers are being fired. Why are they being fired? In fact, the whole nation should join the fight against polio. The army should join the fight against polio. The youth should join the fight against polio. Everybody should, because it can't be that Pakistan and Afghanistan are the only 2 places left on earth with polio. That's an embarrassment. And of course, we must also help our neighbors. If we manage to get a handle on this, we should share what we've learned with Afghanistan. Absolutely. In terms of, you mentioned education, we have a very low literacy rate, and our literacy rate is nothing to do with the people. Pakistan is a poetic country, not only in its history and its heritage and its language and everything, but governments after governments after governments eat the money that is supposed to go for education. And I think it's enough. We've done enough of sort of complaining about it. Now something has to be done about it. So when you would elect an MP and he promises to build a school and he doesn't build a school and there are children not in school, you don't vote for that MP the next time. These are very basic things, and I don't know how we move forward as a country unless we address them aggressively and persistently. When you educate a child, that's not a process that takes a year. Education is generational. You put the money today towards education, in 25 years' time, you will see its result. You won't see it next year. So it's something that we need to be watching constantly and constantly checking and constantly asking. Well, writing is necessary because writing fulfills several goals. It's an archive. It's a way of preserving not only our past and our heritage, but of preserving issues in the present moment and making sure that they're not forgotten. Writing is a way of examining ourselves as a country. Pakistanis have an incredible ability, and I say this very seriously, in that we are a critical people of ourselves. We are a self-reflective people. We are not deluded, or we don't live in a fantasy world like a lot of countries do in a way, because our eyes are open to our country. And we are an introspective people. We're able to take criticism. We're able to give criticism. And we are brave in our criticisms. People are not afraid to say what they think is wrong. So writing is a way of engaging in those conversations. Without writing, how can you further discussions? How can you further debates? How can you further dissent? And I think also that writing is a joyous act as well. It's an act of capturing small, valuable moments of beauty, of celebration, of solidarity. And you see that when you look at Pakistani writers, whether we're talking of contemporary writers or poets. We have such a glorious tradition of that in Pakistan. I always say that Habib Jalib and Faiz Ahmed Faiz are my favorite. And they're my favorite because they're timeless. Whatever that they wrote in the 70s or the 80s, you read today and it feels like it applies to our own lives. Well, I think that writing is something which we tend to romanticize. And we think that, if you have talent, that's all it takes. Unfortunately, it's not the case. You need to have a lot of endurance. And all writers will tell you, whether they're Pakistani or international, and certainly successful writers will tell you that you get rejected all the time. You get told no all the time. You get told it's not ready all the time. And the difference between people who become writers and people who don't is that writers are not put down by that. Writers endure. And they endure and endure and endure, and they work and work and work until the thing is ready. So I would say to young writers, don't be afraid of setbacks. A setback is just a hurdle, and you will always eventually cross a hurdle if you're ready to struggle. Hmm. Mm-hmm. The first book, I'm not sure I can remember the first book. My father Murtaza used to read to me when I was a child, and he was a great orator. He was really eloquent, and so even when he read me children's books, he would read them. You felt like you were watching a movie. And there was one children's book that I loved. I really don't remember the name, and it's about a girl who is banished. It's about a girl who is banished from her home, and she lives in a kind of tower. She lives in a kind of tower by herself, and she cannot she cannot reach where she's supposed to be. I think there might also be a monster in it. And that book used to make me so sad for the girl. And I used to always be sad at the end, because you don't actually know at the end of that book whether the girl gets out or not. But of course, my father read it so beautifully that every night I would ask him to read it again and again and again. But I think good books do that. I've just been asked to judge a writing prize, um, and it's all theater, it's all scripts. And I was reading one of the scripts yesterday, and it made me cry at least twice. So, so good books have that. Good writing, rather, has that power. I think there are several factors. A good story is one that is told in an accessible way. So a good story has to be told in a language you understand and I understand. And by that I mean, big words are not impressive. Like, I don't think big words are interesting. I think when you use simple language, you can convey what you want to convey more powerfully than if you use some fancy word that nobody uses in real life. I think the second thing, which is very important and probably the most important, is observation. If a writer has observed whatever they're writing about thoroughly and intimately and truly, and they have picked up on all the small details of thought and feeling, the small details of life that we all know, but we don't stop to think about long enough, then that's ultimately what takes something from okay to great. You know, Rachel Kushner, who's a writer I really admire, says that, when you're writing, ultimately what you want to do is to create something smarter than yourself, something that is more thoughtful than you are in your day-to-day life, that understands something more deeply in a way than we allow ourselves to think about in the age of distraction. And so that's usually what I'm moved by when I read stories. How well are they told in terms of accessibility, and how minutely observed? I think success is a complicated concept because, if you want to be a writer to be successful, I don't really think you're going to be writing great stuff. If you're chasing a goal, then everything you do in the process is going to be narrow-minded because it's only seeking one thing. For me, success is improving. So I consider success being the fact that you continue to learn as you work. If every book I wrote was the same as the book before, I would not feel successful. But if every book taught me something different and made me learn something new, then I would consider that to be success. I don't think success is awards, and I don't think success is like good reviews, and I don't think success is sales. I think success is internal, and it's a process that no one will be able to chart, but the person themselves. Well, it depends. So, for the Runaways, for example, I was always researching. So throughout the book, whenever a story came up in the papers that was relevant to what I was saying, I would always reader and follow it up. So research is always constant for any book you do. I think you're always thinking about that subject. So anytime you see it somewhere, you want to know more. But for The Runaways, I did about a sort of month of very intensive research. And then I began writing. And then through the process of writing, I would go back and check things. But when I was doing New Kings of the World, which is a nonfiction book, of course, that's totally different because it's a nonfiction book and because I was writing about culture, and culture is constantly evolving and changing. I never stopped researching. So I tried to break it up into sections. So for New Kings of the World, I wrote about Bollywood, I wrote about Turkish dramas, and I wrote about Korean music, K-pop. So I would research each thing on its own. And for example, when I was doing the Bollywood section, the only thing I did was watch Bollywood movies, like in my free time, in my working time, all the time. I wasn't allowed to watch anything else. And I was reading, all the books I were reading were about Bollywood or about India or about those related topics. And then I wrote that section, and then I studied on the Turkish. But of course, something would happen in the world about Bollywood, and I'd have to stop and go back and examine that. So it's kind of a parallel process with writing research. And I like the idea that it doesn't finish. I like the idea that you're always researching. In fact, I would be suspicious of a book that only researched for a bit and then never did it again. You always want to be. I wish them a very happy independence. And I would say to them that there are so many ways in which we are connected to each other. And I think that's important when we talk about a country, or we even talk about a community, that we are bound to each other, not only by the places we love, but we are bound to each other by the stories that mean something to us. And in this way, no one can ever be alone. You're always part of a larger community of people. You're always part of a larger ocean of people, a groundswell of people. And in these strange times we live in, I think that's an important reminder. At least it gives me some hope when I feel a bit low.